about marriage, about anything to do with marriage. So today we have a very interesting topic. But I want to tell you that this is not a parenting show. So we are not talking about how to bring up children. We are talking about how children can help us to be better parents, better people, better spouses. So welcome to the marriage series. We are also doing some reading from Ajmal's book, which you can probably already have. Some of you already have it. If you don't, you can order it on our website. And we have been going through the book chapter by chapter. Today we have come to the section about children.
Inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum, how are you?
Wa alaikum salam. I'm very good. I hope you're well, ladies and gentlemen. I am very well, alhamdulillah. So it's about children, how marriage and children go hand in hand once you have children, of course, and if you have children. It's not that every couple will have children. It's not like that.
No.
There is an expectation that everyone has in their mind, or at least most people have, is that every couple must have children. It doesn't have to be like that. If Allah hasn't chosen children for you, if Allah hasn't destined children for you, then that's fine. That's no problem. Of course, when you have children, your marriage will permanently change, and that change you'll have to be prepared for. So we'll be talking about how we can manage the arrival of children and how we can remain a couple. Often I find many couples, when they come to ask for counseling and support, they started as a couple, then they became parents, and that parenthood lasted for 15 years, 20 years until children have gone to university. And then when the children have gone to university and they're fully adult, able to roam their own world and make their own decisions and have their own friends, even if they live home, even if they live at home or leave home, unfortunately, the couple then realize, oops, we have not been a couple for the last 20 years, 15 years. We've forgotten how to be a couple. And then they stare at one another, not knowing what to do. They get bored, they start fighting, they become territorial, they start pushing the boundaries, the buttons the wrong way. Eventually, they go in their own ways. A lot of couples, unfortunately, end their marriage as soon as children have grown up. So the cycle is very interesting. You start as a couple, you become parents, but you forget to be a couple, and then you leave.
And some parents just stay together because of the children.
Oh, for the duration of the children.
For the duration of the period while you have children. And, we talk about it all the time. We don't promote divorce. But if that's the only reason you are staying together, just to be with the children, you really need to have a solemn look at, is it the good enough reason to stay in relationships?
Yeah. So what is your reason for, firstly, having children? Because, what do you mean, what is our reason for having children? And secondly, it was an accident. Why are you even asking that question? I get that by a lot of people. I say to couples, yes, of course you should have children. May Allah give you more, no problem. But are you really ready for those children? Have you been solid as a couple? Have you provided a safe space? Remember, we began our program many weeks ago talking about the safety of marriage, or safe space in marriage. لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا, to create a safe space for both of them in the marriage, so that they can together grow and survive. They can grow and survive, not just survive. Remember, thrive. Survive and thrive is what we call a proper marriage. So that safe space was also for children. Safe space for children.
Yes. And to be honest, I don't think we get education about this.
No.
We don't know. A lot of us are growing up in families where there's trauma, there's aggression, there's violence, there are all sorts of overstepping boundaries. So it's not something that we are used to. So I remember when we had our first child born, I don't think there was any book I haven't read about how to bring up children. I don't think there was anything I haven't discussed with my friends, with my mother, with the people who have had children before. And yet, when my daughter was born, I was literally feeling I'm completely lost and I have no idea where to go, what to do. And with all the theoretical knowledge, I had no practical, emotional, spiritual understanding of what it means to have a child, not just physically. And this is really an important part. So when she was born, of course, everything started changing, and the idea of being a couple started changing too. But I fear that a lot of couples don't take these steps consciously. We kind of flow into it. We just kind of survive and manage what we can. We do the best we can, which is really what we can do. But imagine if you had a little bit more practical spiritual preparation for how do you remain who you are while you're bringing up children.
I didn't read any books, I have to confess, deliberately. Because in our relationship, I saw my wife reading all the books in the world for parenting. And I said to her, why don't we do this? You read, and I will not read. I will do what we call instinctive parenting, and I'll follow your lead because you're read and more knowledgeable on the topic itself. And you know what, ladies and gentlemen, I can confess to you, but I can also confirm to you that if you resort to the very good essence of the good nature that Allah has given you, innately, inherently, and if you use those basic common sense, you will be fine. But unfortunately, many of our common senses have been distorted. Many of our basic innate nature has been corrupted by our surroundings. So sometimes you may actually need a bit of a support, and definitely you need parenting programs and courses to make your life easier, for sure. Of course, I can't say that I knew answers to everything, but because my wife had read them, had been prepared for it, it helped. Together we were able to experiment like that. But you should not experiment with the lives of your children when you begin such an amazing journey together as parents. So as parents, there are certain things I think we need you to notice. Firstly, you are the primary carer of your children. There is nothing else in the world the children will have except you. You're the physical, emotional, spiritual well-being. You are responsible for that, of your child, as well as how they become intelligent about it. You are the child's guardian, protector, and caregiver. Never forget that. And brothers and sisters, primary caretakership is not a small thing. That little precious gem that has just you have given birth to, as the mother, you've delivered the baby. The father has been anxiously waiting to unite and embrace with this amazing process. You are the only survivor. You are the only means by which this baby can survive. And not understanding that as parents is a big problem.
I guess there are some cultural differences, of course. We will talk about this in another program when it's about extended families, and there are other setups where we can look at how this is impacting. But the first couple of years of the child is literally about us and survival. And don't forget, I find it absolutely fascinating is that when children are born, oxytocin is released into the bloodstream of the mother and the child. It's called the bonding hormone.
Well, love hormone.
A love hormone, because that's what's creating the connection that mothers develop over time before pregnancy, and also during pregnancy, before the birth. And they develop this instinct that whatever happens to the child, you sense it a little bit earlier than the child is giving you signals for it.
Yeah, of course.
So your instinct and your love hormones, you're so connected to the child from the beginning of the birth that it's impossible to overstep. And we only think about the tiredness and the pain, which is part of what we are going through.
One of the most important lessons I learned about children was when a friend of mine, a doctor friend of mine, was explaining how the birthing process takes place. Slightly graphic, but let me be graphic for you all. So
we might have children watching,
so it's fine. I'll be consciously graphic. So a mother's baby, or in the mother's womb, the baby is growing and grown to the age of birth. Many of you and I have wondered, why does a child need to go through such a terrible passage to come to this earth, squeezed and squashed and narrow and absolutely, it's not an easy process. And one of my medical doctor friend explained it to me. He said, inside the mother's womb, when the baby it's completely full of amniotic fluid, liquid, water, in which a sterile, salty environment where a child is born and nurtured and brought up. Do you know why? Because it's the most sterile environment, most protective environment nature has made, Allah has designed, and it's the best way a child will be protected. So when the mother is about to give birth, the first thing that happens is the water is released. There is no more amniotic fluid left inside the womb. The water breaks, as they call it. And then immediately, contractions begin. And contractions is when the hip joints expand and the entire pelvic muscle contracts to be able to push this foreign body from inside out. That child while it was in his mother's womb, was completely filled with water from head to toe. In his nostril, mouth, lungs, entire body was completely full of water. It is said every squeeze the pelvic floor gives to this child, the entire body is squeezed dry of the amniotic fluid that it was covered in. In other words, Allah prepares our lungs to be able to breathe the oxygen and the fresh air that is around us. That's why when the babies are born, they have to go through that passage. And as at each contraction, while the pain is overwhelming, or the pain is of course very, very intense, I would never know, a mother will be able to tell us. You can tell us of course more, but each of those contractions releases the love hormone we talked about. And if anybody has been present in a labor ward, you can smell the oxytocin in the air. I can smell it.
You could, I could.
I can, even now when I go to any hospital, and as soon as I walk into the labor ward, I can smell it. I know this is called Allah's miracle of bonding. And when I was there, when our first baby was born, oh my God, I could feel it overwhelming everything, myself and the room. But anyway, the baby is born, and that's why the babies don't need to be tapped to be cried unless they cry themselves. What happens is the baby forgets to breathe because he's breathing inside the mother's womb naturally. He doesn't need to breathe really.
He's not used to it.
Yeah, when they come out to the world, there is no oxygen given by mother's womb. The umbilical cord has been cut off. It needs to breathe. And the nurses will tap it to wake him up, for her up to breathe. Subhanallah, that's called the nature of Allah's miracle. Now, brothers and sisters, there is a massive lesson there. Because you're the primary caregiver, and the mother more so than the father, your every contraction creates that much more stronger bond with the baby. That's how I look at it.
I wonder, share the experiences. We've got a lot of people commenting, and good morning and salam alaikum everybody who joins us now. What was your experience of the first moments with your children? Some of us have phenomenal births and amazing experiences. Some of us have really traumatic, difficult. I had 2 children, and both of them were completely different. One was a relatively easy without painkillers, and all my yoga breathing and all those pregnancy yoga sessions were very useful. With the second one, I struggled a lot more. I had over 24 hours labor.
Well, there was a nurse who messed it up for you.
And it was a very difficult
midwife,
and the whole process was just incredibly traumatic. And I think when you go back and think about how it was, and you look at how your relationship with your children is, there probably is a connection.
Of course there is. Let's read some of this. Sarah Huda Gordon says Assalamu alaikum. Rumana Assalamu alaikum to both. Ihsan says Assalamu alaikum. One of the problem has been cultural behavior. Correct.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that later. Aisha Saeed says, would you want to read that?
This is the most important function of humankind. I'm assuming she's referring to having children, and yet we ignore it. In the Asian context, so much is expected of the mother in terms of tending to families and households that very little time is left for conscious parenting. I like that expression of conscious parenting, so thank you. So what we will do, we are developing certain areas of our work. One of them is parenting, so we will be doing parenting courses later on. But today we wanted to focus on how do you remain a couple, and how can you grow as an individual, as a couple, while you have children. And we will talk about the context. We will talk about your setup and how you parent, for the sake of how you can develop a relationship with each other.
So if you just quickly browse through the first couple of points, you're an educator, you're a role model, you're an inspiration, you're a mentor, you're a coach for your children.
High expectations.
Remember, only 5 really. Primary caregiver, an educator, a role model, an inspiration, a mentor, and a coach.
It's still quite a lot to go through. If you really want to do this well, there's a lot to think about.
We will come back to talking about how to be good parents. But let's go straight to page 286, which talks about how are you going to remain husband and wife while remaining parent to your child.
Oh yes, I remember when my daughter was born, my husband said to me, just let me be the father I want to be. Don't tell me how to be a father. And I remember that sentence very well, because it was probably about a week after.
Because you were giving me all sorts of advice from the books that you had read. And I said to me, stop giving me lectures from the books. I'm quite happy to be an instinctive father, a conscious father for sure. Well, ladies and gentlemen, between breastfeeding, nappy changing, cat napping, eating, irregular toilet breaks, finding couple time is very difficult.
But let's talk about it first. How did it change you as a person when you had the children?
Well, it hits you. If I will go back to the first moment when my daughter was born, our daughter was born, I was the first one to hold her, even before the nurse. As she was coming out, I grabbed her, and overwhelming sense of achievement, overwhelming sense of joy and love to see a bundle of joy, your own DNA being reproduced in this amazing way by Allah's mercy, who comes out, and then you stare. And I think somebody said to me, is it a boy? You said to me, boy or a girl? And I was crying my eyes out, and I said with my tearful voice, it's a girl. Anyway, we took her to the table where you put her on. Yeah, just a table where they clean her up. And the first thing my daughter did was raise her neck, and the nurses laughed and said, "That's very unusual. This girl has got a strong head," and she does have a strong head. I was the first one to change the nappy for her. So I have a very vivid memory of my daughter, and I have a very strong, powerful recollection of being complete. Not that I was incomplete, but for some reason, that natural human cycle taking its complete course. I was born, I was a husband, I had become a father. That cycle, I felt complete. How did you feel?
Oh, I didn't feel anything. I was just happy that it was over. I think for about a month. I think it really hit me after. The changing part started for me well after my daughter was born. I was quite happy when I was pregnant. I was very conscious. I became very
Read that
clear.
bottom line.
Assalamu alaikum. Even though my first childbirth was traumatic, he was all forgotten, and once he was in my arms, yes. But you do forget the pain. But I think for me, the changing process didn't start with pregnancy. Of course, my habits became different, and the one thing I did with my daughter is I stopped drinking coffee, which was a huge undertaking, which I didn't do with the second. But the real change actually started for me after about a month, when my daughter was my mother was with me, and I developed a very good relationship with my mother around the time. But then everything started changing. Our lifestyle, our rhythms, our patterns, and everything was just going wobbly and all over the place. And I think I really felt that there was no ground under my feet for probably about a year.
You and our daughter struggled in the beginning a lot, because there was a pull and push, tug of war between the two of you, because you were both very strong-headed people. So that was very visible from the day she was born. She was pushing in your direction, you were pulling away, you were pushing, she was pulling away. It was very, very much a struggle that I observed. Ladies and gentlemen, some of these observations are now, in hindsight, you get to learn from. But we are sharing this with you because we would like you to be couples. So the most important thing you can do at a time when one of you or both of you are struggling is seek for help and support. So if my wife is struggling, I should be there to support her. And if I'm struggling, she should be here to support. That's why it's two people who become parents, not one. You can't have a baby by one person alone. Sure, you can be pregnant, but even the impregnation process must be of two. And then both of them have to work together to be able to go all the way and then bring up the baby or bring up the child. So the most important thing we want to say is always remain a couple no matter what happens.
And the only way actually you can do it at the very beginning when you have children is literally focusing on keeping the connection, whether it's with a text message, whether it's a phone call. You won't have the time, you won't have the capacity to go out, you won't have the time to have couple time, you have to be even more conscious and careful that how do you spend your evening. So I remember when our children were very small, I introduced a routine very early to them from the day they were born, because I knew that the only adult thinking time, adult time, parent time, couple time I can get is when they go to bed. Otherwise there was no other time. So you have to be very conscious of how you design the children's life. The kids still laugh at me when we talk about 7 o'clock was my time. If it was 7 o'clock, don't talk to me, it's my time. You go to bed, read, calm down, do whatever you want to do.
We did that all the way till they were about 10, I think, religiously for both of them. That 7 o'clock is...
But 7 got pushed a little bit later on. But it's something about routine and habit that is very important.
So strictly guard and instill in your family a time regime, a schedule. It's very important, ladies and gentlemen. This is something that I say to Asian communities, even the Arab communities. Often I berate them for letting their children roam wild until 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, terrible, awful hours. It impacts the child's growth. A child needs as many hours as they naturally can get to sleep. So, for example, if the child is young, they should have at least 10 hours of sleep, 12 hours of sleep. And they should go to sleep at a time when it's civilized for them. So we would put our children to bed at 7. 7 till 7, they stay in bed. Even if they wake up at 6 o'clock, still they've had a good 11-hour rest. If you don't allow that child to rest well, sleep well, there is an impairment in their brain growth. According to medical science, according to child specialists and psychologists, they say it affects them in every way possible. So, routine, put them to sleep on time at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, and make that fixed. No later than 8 o'clock for a child, as far as I'm concerned. 7 o'clock is probably pushing a little bit for me. But okay, 8 o'clock we can agree. The second thing we did in our relationship was we established some routines for the children, some discipline. So I remember when my daughter was younger, when she was able to hold on to her spoons in her hand. You would give her a bowl of rice with some lentils or whatever you made and put it in front of her with the bowl and the spoon and let her learn to eat. And how long did it take for her to learn to eat?
Very short time, probably about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Maximum.
For the first 2 weeks, she put it in her nose, in her ears, on the floor. That's fine, no problem. Eventually, it went inside her mouth because her stomach is rumbling, and she knows there's only one way to get the food inside her mouth. She will learn, and she learned how to coordinate hand and mouth movement. So, and I see this in Bengali culture, one of the most awful habits. And sorry, ladies and gentlemen, if you're Bangladeshi, I happen to be from the same background, so I think I can give you the internal critique. I see parents holding a bowl in their hand with some rice and curry that they've mixed up and with their hands running around trying to feed their child. The child is roaming the house and parents are running behind them to feed them. This is an awful habit. It's one of the most terrible habits. What are you doing by doing this? You're teaching this child that running around while eating is okay. Secondly, you're teaching this child that mommy will feed you.
No matter what.
Yeah, you don't have to feed yourself. And third, you are shoving down food down someone's throat. It's a bad relationship with the food. They don't have loving relationship with food, appreciative relationship with the food, but an enforced feeding regime. It's like being in a hospital. I'm unable to eat. The nurse is feeding me by force.
Yeah. One of my favorite is when we see children in pushchairs, 6, 7-year-old, and they don't have any physical difficulties. We know that, but because they are lazy or the parents, it's just easier to do the shopping. I need the pushchair. They go in the shopping center with the pushchair. A child sitting there. Instead of teaching how to walk, they use the shopping basket for packing up all the things that they buy, but the child doesn't learn independence. So one of the things as us as individuals we need to learn, and it's very difficult to let go of the control that I have to do everything for the child. No, we need to teach them how to be self-sufficient. We need to teach them how to be independent, make their own decisions, and because it saves so much trouble for later on. People who struggle at the age of 10, 11 years old, it's very likely that they didn't develop healthy habits at the beginning when the children were younger. So now it's harder to change.
So if you have been the mummy running around feeding your child, if you've been the mummy running around putting your child's clothes in the right place, tidying up their bed, doing everything for them, I'm afraid you are debilitating your child. You are creating a child who will be incapacitated by their parents' imposition. Their parents, as parents, you should keep that space, allow them to grow, give them the tool to learn, give them a mop and a bucket and tell them to mop up the kitchen, give them a hoover to hoover up, give them a dustpan and a brush to tell them to clear up after them. Tell them to go and tidy up you can teach them, of course you teach them by folding it up once, twice, showing them with love and care, but doing it for them is the worst thing you to do. So, first thing we talked about is remain couples. Never sacrifice on that by spending quality time, but create disciplined time or time, a schedule for them to sleep, a schedule for them to eat. And third thing we talked about is give them independence. What's the number 4?
I can't remember what number 4 you mentioned is
to give your children some basic morals and manners in life. And they don't learn that basic morals and manners in life from your words, but they learn it from you as parents.
What you do. It's not what you say, it's what you do.
So as couples, You need to remain loving couple. Your children will learn that. You need to remain courteous couple. Children will learn that. Even when the children are pushing you, you need to remain a couple who are respectful of one another. If you display disrespect, if you display immorality, indecency in your language, in your talk, in your behavior, if you're aggressive, if you are shouting and screaming and swearing, your children will mimic that. So as a couple, remain the role model that you would like your children to follow.
It's funny when people complain about, oh, my children are running havoc and the house is a mess and the house is always loud, and you know, when people step back and they look at what's actually happening in their house, it's just what they do. They do the same thing. You know, couples screaming and shouting at each other, expecting the children to be quiet and not to do anything. Children always pick up the energy of the house. They pick up your anxieties, they pick up your difficulties, they pick up the way you speak. You remember that story that we had when we were arguing about something?
Yeah, of course, children do. We've already discussed it with them.
Pick up, absolutely. So it's about you consciously thinking about how are you as a spouse is indirectly and directly impacting your daughter, what kind of wife she's going to be, and you as a father, you will indirectly impact how your son is going to be a husband,
or the daughter, as to how she's going to be a wife to a man. This is so essential, I think. We often forget, and we tell children to go and pray. We don't pray. We go and tell children to be tidy, but we're not tidy. We tell children to put their plates away, but we don't do it ourselves. We expect our wife to do it. You know, brothers and sisters, in our house, we have a regime that works very well. For example, when my wife cooks, the rest of us have to clean up without any failure. Our children are involved. They wash, they dry up. I'm involved. I wash, I dry up. We do all of the rest. And it's a partnership between everybody. It's about teaching your children the skills, life skills. Now, when I look at my children, they can make the kitchen spotlessly clean. We can just leave them to it. And 2 years ago, perhaps that was not possible. But they've learned it because we as parents have demonstrated through our behavior. I have never left my wife to clean up after a dinner that she has cooked, especially when I have no appointments and no engagements. I don't have to go anywhere. And if I'm at home, I will make sure that I'm helping her before and during and after. That's been our habit, and children have learned that. So if you want your children to be in a particular way, you want to teach them morals and manners, if you want to teach them habits and traits that you think are good, then as couples demonstrate that between yourselves in your home, in front of your children.
And this is very interesting because our daughter, who is now 15, she keeps saying, well, I know how to iron. When are you going to teach your son how to iron? And you know, you are giving life skills to your children.
Yes.
Whatever happens to them, you need to think about what are the skills that I have given them so their marriage can be more successful.
I bet you any money, my son's school, because he goes to a boys' school, boys must have spoken about this to one another. Oh, my mummy does all the cooking.
No, but they have cooking lessons, which is...
No, I know, but what I'm saying is they must have within themselves, because we now notice there is a little bit of resistance from our son when it comes to domestic work. But alhamdulillah, he's very amenable, he's very kind, and he's very able to help.
He loves cooking.
He loves cooking. So it's about us nurturing that skill more and not falling for the stereotype.
Yeah.
In the playground, the other kids may be laughing, saying, yeah, I don't do any cooking and cleaning, my mum does, or my sisters do. That stereotype needs to be broken. Our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ used to mend his own shoes, he used to mend his own clothes, he used to knead his own dough, he used to cook, he used to help and support. SubhanAllah, that's the example we're trying to follow, right? So, brothers, if you don't cook at home, perhaps because you're a useless cook, go and learn how to cook. If you don't want to cook, go and help and offer or clean up after your wife is cooked. Don't leave everything to your wife or your mum or your sisters or your daughters. We need to be good role model. I keep on saying this. If you want to really teach your children the behavior skills that are conducive to being Muslim and 21st century sensitive, kind, caring, liberated and enlightened man, not the caveman that we have seen in too many houses, then go and do it with your wife and show it to them as to how it's done at home. Cook, clean, iron, hoover, get yourselves and your hands dirty. That's what I call real fatherhood.
In one word, participate in family life.
Completely.
Because we have seen so many couples, so many families where, you know, usually when we talk about children, it's the mothers who turn up for these lessons. It's the mothers who struggle. It's the mothers who are at the suffering end more than the father. And the father complains, oh, it's not done in the way I want to do. How much effort do you put in? It's an investment. Children aren't going to happen in 24 hours. It's an investment you do from the very beginning all the way. I believe that even if the children leave the house, they are still our children, and we have to make every investment. I admire couples where grandparents take the children every weekend, every Saturday, for example, they would spend the night. I remember I have very fond memories of my grandparents. It's one of those situations that we cannot see the results, and we will not see the results. Actually, one of our friends said to us not long ago, now that your kids are teenagers, now you are going to see whether what you've taught them is going to work.
Yes.
Or has it worked, because you don't see the results for a very long time, yet we have to invest every single time, and that impacts our couple life, and we have to be very conscious of that.
Hafsa Adam has just written, Salam, I love the saying, what you
do speak so loud, I can't hear a word you say. Yes.
When you speak so loud, maybe, I can't hear a word you say. Very relevant to parents and children. Parents have to be role model, role model the behavior they want their children to adopt. Absolutely spot on. So brothers and sisters, number 4, that was that the children that you have, the model that you would like them to have, the role model that you would like to be demonstrating to them, or the morals and manners that you would like them to adopt, you must demonstrate that in your couple relationship. And the 5th one is your favorite one.
Which one was that?
Teaching your children how to be emotionally intelligent.
Well, I think that comes across the board of being a coach, being a role model, being an inspiration to the child. Is that emotional intelligence is one of my favorite things that I believe. I'm just seeing a couple of couples at the moment. I started teaching couples on emotional intelligence. And, this is where it begins. What you learned from your own family is what you will do, and how you will repeat the same cycle and the same pattern. What you didn't unlearn and rewire in your brain, you will continue the same pattern and the same ideology. It's about how do you speak emotions, how do you recognize them, how do you express them, what do you do with them, how do you manage the house, how do you manage your couple scenarios. It's incredibly important.
So brothers and sisters, emotional intelligence are learned by children by seeing their parents' emotional intelligence. So for example, if I don't express my love to my wife, if I don't express my emotional presence of my presence in the relationship by hugs, by kisses, by touch, my children will never learn. Why shouldn't my children see me kiss my wife? Why shouldn't they? Some people say, Astaghfirullah, brother, how can they see that? Well, it's halal for me to kiss my wife. Shouldn't my children see that? Of course they should see that. There's a difference between a passionate, intimate kiss, which is not to be private, but a loving kiss of love and gesture of kindness in the family that is so relevant. Prophet ﷺ used to do that to his own wife, Aisha radiallahu anha, and his other wives. It was a very normal gesture. So children will learn by the way you touch your spouse, by the way you give them hugs, by the way you sit with them, by the way you express your words of affirmation, kindness, generosity. And those children, when they grow up, they will also realize, and they will also be able to demonstrate this to their spouse. If they don't see their parents doing it, they will never do it to their spouse, because they will be very shy. They will have this subconscious shyness artificially implanted in their head. Oh, astaghfirullah, don't do that. Why not? So brothers and sisters, I would like you to do this. We were laughing at my father and my mother. My father in his 80s, after he started suffering from dementia, he used to hold my mum's hand and stroke it.
But never before.
I've never seen him in my life. Never ever seen him even come close to my mother. Because as far as our culture is concerned, astaghfirullah is not done like that. Well, it is done like that. Especially in a society where everything is so open. That's the least you can do. Moderate expression and display of affection between couple, the parents at home, is the best way to teach your children emotional intelligence. So they know how to manage their own emotion, recognize them, express them, manage other people's emotions, express them, as well as respond to them adequately.
It's children literally soak up. And if you remember your own life, we soaked up what we were surrounded by. Our parents' behavior, our parents' ways of talking about love, anger, fear, any other big emotions. We soaked that up, not with words. They never gave us a lecture about this, but we adopted behaviors subconsciously, and our bodies literally follow instead of our thinking. So emotional intelligence is a practice, but we have to take it consciously.
And why don't you, okay, let me ask this blunt question. What stops you from actually giving your wife a hug or husband a hug in front of your children? Go and answer this question, people. You can answer it on the page itself. What stops you and prevents you from actually saying to your husband or your wife in front of your children, I love you? What stops you from giving your husband or your wife a kiss, a gentle kiss, of course, in front of your children? What stops you from holding your wife's or your husband's hand in front of your children, sitting next to them, arms in arms maybe, or walking on the street with holding each other's hands with your children? What stops you? God, I'd like to see the answer to this.
I was still laughing when we go out and I grab your hand and he still turns his head away. He's like, oh, why are you doing this?
The children are naturally like that, but you need to teach them it's okay. Yeah, it's halal. It's called halal love, a young man or a young woman, if they're with you. Let them learn. It's so important. Anyway, my question still stands. What stops you? I want some answers, brothers and sisters. I do want to be able to understand where you're coming from. Is it haram as far as you're concerned? Is it not the done thing in your culture? Is it something your parents have frowned upon and you've never seen them do or they've told you off? What is it that stops you from expressing moderate level of affection to your spouse in front of your children? Go on, somebody. Put your thoughts on a piece of paper. No, on our screen.
Not many people are saying anything.
Because they're shy.
People, I think, jealousy. In my case, my stepchildren got extremely jealous.
Well, stepchildren is another discussion.
Yes. I think we should do something about that as well, and one of the programs should be about that, because there are cases and scenarios which is not the usual. Men and women get married, they have children, but there are scenarios where you either get married to somebody who has children already, or there are multiple children from different backgrounds. And it's a reality in our community, so we need to probably address that separately.
So jealousy could be not just children. Jealousy could be with step parents. So your mother, your father is not your biological mother, your father, and your parents have divorced and they're now married, and you watch them, you get jealous. It could be children, it could be one of the spouses. You need to take your children with you on this.
Yes, and it's an extremely good reminder, and also it's an opportunity. So the issue of jealousy, the idea of jealousy, is bring it to the conversation, to everybody. Talk about it. This is another way, another angle of developing even stronger emotional intelligence.
The best way of overcoming jealousy, Hannah, is to actually take the person on a walk, on a journey with you for the reason they're jealous. So, for example, if you're jealous about your this one, Nahla's point about stepchildren, why not hold the stepchildren's hand too? Say, come, let's all hold together. I know it's a bit of a shy environment to be in, but you're the stepmother, you're the stepfather, you're their mahram. It's haram for them to have any relationship with you except the same of a parent. So therefore, tell them, come, let me hold you. Hold my hand. Husband, wife, and children on all sides or in the middle. Create a chain if you want. If you can take the children, if they feel that they're secure, they don't think that you're taking their parent or their father, their mother away from them, then they will not be jealous. It's the insecurities, the fear of loss that creates jealousy. It's the envy of somebody has it and I don't have it, and I wish they never had it, which becomes the negative and destructive one. So take them with you. We'll talk about it in more details, but for now, to advise to my dear sister Nahla, we know him very, very well, mashallah. Nahla, take those stepchildren with you. Talk to them about the emotions, the impacts. What does it mean? What does it mean for them when they see me, when they see you holding on to their father's hand? How do they feel? Reassure them. Hold their hands and go for a long walk. It will start with small steps, but you get there eventually.
Rumana Ahmed, shyness, our culture sees it as modesty. And
it's immodest.
It's Asian culture.
It's immodest to touch your wife, hold your wife
but so it is not to call her by name, right? So
oh my God.
That was my favorite when I was getting married, and I was told that I should never call my husband by name. And I said, so how shall I call him? What do I do? And they said, just call him Oi or A or whatever.
You know, it's so crazy in Bangladesh.
Yes.
There's a family where in Bangladesh they give all sorts of names to their children.
Right.
So somebody's name is San Mia. Sun means the sun itself.
The sun.
Yeah. So no, sun means moon. Sorry, moon. In Bengali, sun means moon. So San Mia is Moon Mia, right? So the lady, when she wants to show the moon in the night sky, she would not call it the moon, because it's her husband's name. Look, it's that. What's that called, mummy? She won't call the name because it's her
Really?
husband's name.
Oh wow.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's very crazy. I remember my father calling my mother. Never, ever have I heard him call her by the name. He would call her Oi, Hey,
Or something.
or some really obscure words. Where do you get that from? Rasul Sallallahu used to call Fatima, Fatima. His daughter, he used to call Aisha, Aisha, Khadija, Khadija by their name. Abu Bakr, Asma. When Abu Bakr, when one of the wives of Abu Bakr said, if Umar, sorry, said, if Umar has an issue with me going to the mosque, then let Umar stop me in calling Umar by the name. So this cultural barrier that we've created, firstly, it doesn't work in the 21st century world. Secondly, it doesn't work in Britain. And thirdly, I'm really sorry, Bangladeshis and Asians and Pakistanis and Indians or anyone else for that matter, that kind of cultural baggage doesn't really make sense. I'm really sorry. It makes no sense. Why would it be wrong? Give me your hand. Why would it be wrong to hold your wife's hand? She's my wife, right? Hold your wife's hand or your husband's hand. Walk with them together. When I see elderly couple, especially within the Asian communities, walk on the streets holding their hands, I stop and I want to take a picture of them because it really warms my heart. Hafsa has written a long one.
I believe public displays of affection is very often handled by because of the perceived shame of being seen by others and efforts to be modest. The quote I mentioned before said, what you do speak so loud I can't hear what you say, meaning your actions speak much louder than your words, which is everything you are saying. Mashallah. Thank you. Sorry that we misread it. So thank you for this reminder, and also connecting it to the previous what we were talking about is that when your children don't see you modest, and the word here is modest, display of love and affection, what are they going to do when they're teenagers? They're going to do everything behind your back.
And extreme.
And they will go extreme. So this is why you see safe space. Going back again, a home is a safe space. And if children don't feel that it's safe for them to learn how to learn the basics of modest display of affection, they will go and do it behind your back.
Of course.
And they will go out of your
What
control.
do you think? They will not be holding hands of the
course,
opposite?
and worse. And we have high teenage pregnancy
Of
rates
course.
because children are not safe at home emotionally. They don't have the capacity to discuss these things with
And
their
they
parents.
get infatuated very
Yes.
quickly with any attention that they get.
Yes.
Why?
Yes, because at home they don't get any.
Precisely my point.
Girls who don't get any attention from their fathers or their mothers. My daughter still screams and shrieks every time I say how beautiful you are. I don't care. I keep saying it because she is going to get used to the idea that she doesn't need to go outside for attention. She can get it from home, and she's beautiful and she's amazing. And what we demonstrate to her, she doesn't need to seek it outside.
Correct. And I think that emotional intelligence is so important as parents that you should have in order for your children to have. Okay.
So just before I forget my thought, you have children, they trigger something in you. If you can overcome that, you are not only empowering yourself and your family, you are empowering your children. Therefore, the impact is in their families is going to be multiplied.
Faria Manzoor says some couples are shy or ashamed to express their love to each other, even in front of their children, due to cultural upbringing. As you say, their parents have not done it, so they too because very shy. Other couples may have grown apart and no longer express love to one another. This must be very harmful for children's understanding of marriage and expression of love. Wonderfully said,
Beautiful.
Faria Manzoor. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want your children to have a distorted view of love and affection, distorted view of parenthood, and distorted view of what it means to be in a marital space, then you behave like that. If you really want to display to the children the true nature of it, then you display by action. Number six, as parents, your spiritual intelligence is also something that children will pick up on. So how often do you actually pray with them? How often do you sit down and discuss issues of spirituality, issues of the food for your soul? How often do you encourage your children to give in charity? How often do you take your children to the service of humanity, volunteering for something good and worthy? Maybe if you can afford it during the time when there are no lockdowns, taking them to an orphanage, to a poor country of the world. All of those are your spiritual intelligence. How you pray with them, how you supplicate, how you make dua, how you keep them with you in making dua, how you relate to God and how they relate to God, how conversations that you have with them, what kind of conversations you have with them, whether you stifle their questions or whether you encourage their questions, whether you serve humanity, whether you take them to charity or an orphan space. Don't have to go to another country. Go to a soup kitchen in the UK, food distribution centre. Even today during the COVID time, where they're giving out food in food bank, you can do so much to teach your children spiritual intelligence.
And we live in a context in where we are. How do you bring God into their education, into their conversations, into what they are picking up? Because I don't know about your children, but some of our children don't go to Islamic school. One of ours does and the other doesn't. And if you think about the impact that when they are at school, even if it's online, they spend 70% of their time at school. And that thinking has to be counteracted with more spiritually inclined material. So how do you bring God into the equation? Last weekend we had a very interesting, my son was struggling with something really, really badly. And he was desperate and he didn't know how to help himself. And he looked at me and he said, "Can we do some Imam al-Ghazali?" And my heart just burst with love. And I just felt so grateful that we have been struggling to maintain once a week, giving them some sort of spiritual conversations, and these are literally half an hour, 45-minute conversations a week. Once a week we do, and they moan and groan and it's so complicated, it's so difficult. And I'm persistent about this material because I'm very passionate about this. So when he said this to me, "Can we do some Ghazali?" I said, thank God he is going to Ghazali, and that's good enough for now. Of course we have to develop, but you cannot teach and expect your children to know these things by themselves. You can't. You have to make an effort. You have to, again, invest your time in yourself, so you are investing in them too.
Pick up a chunk of the Quran, a passage of the Quran, or a verse of the Quran that you'd like them to study. Sit down with them and have a chat with them. Talk to them about case studies of people who have struggled in life and how they've made it. Talk about people who are less fortunate in life, who are vulnerable and who have still made it. Give them that spiritual boost that it's not all about them. It's the antithesis to ego. It's the antithesis to arrogance and pride, selfishness, and instill in them the value of altruism, value of selflessness, value of care and share. It's called spiritual intelligence, ladies and gentlemen. If you can't give spiritual intelligence to your children, they will struggle. And if they can't see you as parents actually demonstrating spiritual intelligence in your life, then they will definitely not find spirituality interesting at all. So when my daughter and my son, in the middle of a conversation, would remind me how they still remember a few years back in a khutbah, in a Friday sermon, I said something and it still triggers them in their mind. They're still thinking about it, and in a conversation it comes back. You know that everything that you've taught hasn't disappeared. It's still there.
And that's really the best we can do. We can't force anything else. But also, I think for parents to realize the importance of paying attention, because some of us, we delegate it to an imam. We send them to a Muslim school. We send them to
online
a Saturday
platforms.
School or whatever. We send them, and we think, it's because a bit of Islamic education. It is not just about Islamic education. It's spiritual education. We need to be making the distinction. Yes, if your goal is to teach them the whole Quran and memorize, that's fine. That's a goal. That's a religious part, and it's a part. But there is something, how do they apply those things in real practice? Because there's no point of just doing theory.
So we don't necessarily want to teach them only how to do things, but why to do things. How to can be learned online from a program.
On YouTube at the moment.
Yeah,
you just type in anything, how to do this, you get it.
But why requires parental conversation. So spiritual intelligence at home is essentially that tool. I've got somebody else has written.
Hafsa, a mantra in our house is a family who prays together stays together. Absolutely. We do our best to pray in Jannah with our kids. It really offers moments of bonding, discussion after prayers, and heart-to-heart connections. Absolutely. Wonderful.
I think this is the key. Pray together, stay together, really. And nowadays that we're locked up in our own homes, I say stay at home and pray at home, Yeah. I don't see a reason why you should do, you have to worry about it. It's a great golden opportunity to bond with your wife, your daughter, especially because if you go to the mosque so often and leave them behind, many of our people don't take their daughters to the mosques because they think, astaghfirullah, woman in a mosque. That's another discussion for another time. But today, let's create the mosque at home. Let's create our space at home so that we can connect with our children. So we've got about 5 minutes before we finish. Actually, we should be finishing in the next few minutes. If you've got any final questions and thoughts about how to remain children, how to remain
conscious
parents
and
couple, how to remain a couple while being a parent, is what we're talking about today. So we want to quickly summarize. What are your golden tips to people as to how to remain couples while remaining parents?
So for me, it's being mindful of the different roles. Of being a parent doesn't mean the same thing as being a spouse, and that requires some thinking on our part to design when am I a parent, when do I stop being a parent, and when do I become a couple or a spouse, so I can actually fulfill both roles.
Absolutely. So that's one thing. For myself is to live what I preach to my children, or practice what I preach. That's what I always say to parents.
Walk the talk.
Yeah, if I can't practice what I preach, I will be my children will not only despise me, but in their heart they will think I'm a hypocrite. And that's the last thing you want, your children to think you are a hypocrite. On the day of judgment, Allah has prepared the lowest of hell for those who are hypocrites. So we have to be as consistent as possible. So brothers and sisters, Faria says, Manzoor, this is
memorizing surahs together is also a good way to discuss and learn.
Of course, anything that you do together, whether you play a game together, garden together, cook together, walk together, whatever you do together as a family with your children is very, very beneficial for you and for everybody else. Okay.
So a bit of marketing.
Oh yes, forgotten.
So
I don't understand. Has everyone bought the book?
I don't know.
Have you all bought my book yet? Brothers and sisters, please, I keep on reminding you. If you all bought my books, I've got 55,000 people who follow me on Facebook.
55? Oh, that's a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, put both of my pages together, you probably got to go to 70.
Okay.
I don't think I have got 70,000 books to sell.
No. So we are going through this book together. If you wanted to have a copy of this, if you don't have it, if you want to give it as a gift, it's a fabulous gift for people who are getting married. The wedding season is coming up, so it's probably a lovely little gift that you can put with your envelopes.
Can I add something?
Sure.
BBC's Asad Ahmed.
Oh, you're doing it next week.
I'm doing that, but I'll do that announcement in a minute. I gave him the book to read. He read it in one go. He said it was captivating. I couldn't put it down. It was so glued to the book. It's so good. And then he said to me, what has this book been 10 years ago?
Right.
So, alhamdulillah, brothers and sisters, fantastic review from everybody who was reading the book, who has got the book. Please buy not one copy, but 2-3 copies and give them away to people. Remember, what you are doing is you're also supporting Barefoot's work by buying many copies. It enables us to do our job well. Keep on doing and keep on writing, keep on providing programs for people so they can stay together. So next Saturday, there will be a program. Let me get the exact details. I don't want to miss.
Okay. In the meantime, if you go on our website, barefootinstitute.com, you can see some of our older videos. Please do share it with people you think might benefit from these conversations. Send us an inquiry. We have a bookstore. We have some resources available on the website. You can download. You can get in touch with us. So there's a lot going on, and we've got a lot of plans for 2021. Inshallah.
I'm very tempted to share this image on the screen, but I don't know how. But nevertheless, I'm going to tell you, and you'll find it on my Facebook page as well as my Twitter. Saturday, the 13th of February, that is next Saturday at 12 p.m. noon. That's 12 noon exactly. On our YouTube platforms, on our Facebook platforms, you will find a live conversation about my book with Asad Ahmed, the BBC presenter, the news reader, and it's going to be a live conversation. So if you want to join in, please do, and tell everybody. And any book that we sell as a result of that conversation during that campaign, 25% of the proceeds will go to the charity itself called GLT. That's the Graham Layton Trust, helping people see. They do treatments for people's eyes, and that's just an amazing project. Anyway, I don't want to talk anymore. Buy the book from the website, my book, Hannah's book. Support us, send us your questions, your thoughts, and your ideas. Inshallah, until next Sunday.
Next Sunday morning. Have a lovely week, and inshallah see you next week.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum.